So for more insight, we now keeping in studio Ruthie Blum, columnist at the Jerusalem Post, Jeremy Saltan, candidate for the Israeli parliament from the Yamina party, and Dr. Raviv Schwartz, expert and commentator on civil society. And Jeremy, there are some tough decisions coming out of Naftali Bennett's camp. Talk to us. When he says he will do what's best for Israel, what exactly is that?
Well, it means that he'll do what's best for Israel. We just listened to what Mansour Abbas is saying. Whoever gives him the most for his constituency will be who he ends up going with. What we're saying is we're going to do what's best for all Israeli citizens. That is who our constituency is. And when we see the final results, and I agree it's probably going to be on Friday when we do see, maybe the official results, be the unofficial results should be very clear by Friday. We'll make a decision based on what happens. Obviously, this is a three-stage process. Once we see the results of the election, we get to the point where you have the nominations in the president's residence. After that, we, of course, go into the fun horse race and all of the coalition negotiations and who's going to answer whose phone call and who's going to sit with who and how that plays out until we get to an actual confidence vote in the Knesset. But let's also remember that it's been 2 years since we've really had any real stability. The previous government that we tried to make was not a very, very good one. I think it's pretty clear looking at the election results, anyone who decided that that was something they wanted to go into ended up paying a political price for doing so. So we'll have to wait and see. I know that's not what everyone wants to hear, but at this point, we don't have the final results, and we'll have to wait for that.
Given that you say people want stability, if Naftali Bennett needs to sit with Ram to ensure that stability and make sure the country doesn't go to a fifth election, is that a viable option right now?
I don't see any possibility in which you're going to see Naftali Bennett sitting together either with Mansour Abbas or on the other side with the Balad party of the joint list. I just don't see either of those being very, very stable governments. I don't see that even being something that makes any sense on an ideological level. I don't think on a practical level. And let's also remember the fact that with this, I know Ruthie doesn't like it, but the anti-Bibi camp and the Bibi camp and the fighting that we're having, where we are, and we're very unique in this way, is that we're the only ones that can really be the responsible adults. And if needed, again, we'll see what the final results are, but if needed, we can reach to both sides of the aisle and sort of, figure out a way to have some stability and perhaps bring something from both sides to create a more stable government.
Break that down a little bit for us. When you say being the responsible one, reaching out, who would you reach out to?
We would do what we need to do to avoid a fifth election. And again, until we know what the actual results are, it's very difficult. A seat here, a seat there. Like Ruthie said, this is a situation where every seat that's gained by someone else loses a seat. There is a lot more to be dealt with. We're not even starting the counting of the double envelopes at this time. We're going to probably do that tonight. The double envelopes traditionally has been very good for my party, but in general, it's usually been good for certain parties, been very bad for others. So even if everyone is completely certain, as they are right now, that with the 5 seats Mansour Abbas is passing, if he does terrible over there, he could even still fall under the threshold.
So I want to bring you in, Dr. Schwartz, and talk to us about the options. Would the centre-left sit with Naftali Bennett?
Yeah, let me contextualize my answer for a moment. One of Netanyahu's campaign slogans was to be able to create a full-blown right-wing government. That seems very unlikely, given that in the ideal case scenario, from his perspective, he's looking at a government of maybe 61 seats. I would suggest, and I'm, mind you, speaking only as an individual, I don't represent any party, but I would suggest that the goal of a center-left or an anti-Netanyahu government would be much more modest in scope. It would be a government that would come into being for one purpose only, and that is to usher in a new era of stability in this country. There's a reason, this is maybe the elephant in the room, there's a reason I've been in the studio 4 times in the last 2 years, and he has a name. It's Prime Minister Netanyahu, who for all kinds of reasons has refused to accept the will of the majority. In any democratic regime, the will of the majority is in many ways the essence of democracy, and the majority of people in this country, voters, have voted against his continued rule. My suggestion is that all those forces that make up the anti-Netanyahu camp form a transitional government, the primary purpose of which is to, first of all, purge the Prime Minister's residence from the pernicious effects of the Prime Minister and his family, and to perhaps enact legislation that will make it impossible for someone against whom there are 3 serious criminal charges being levied to function as Prime Minister. No one would bat an eyelash if you wanted to enact legislation to prevent a suspected arsonist from being appointed head of the fire department. For some reason in this country, you can't be a minister if you were being charged with criminal charges. I couldn't function as a teacher, which I do. But he's been able not only to function as Prime Minister, but to drag this entire country through this whirlwind of repeated elections and instability. If your party leader agrees to put ego aside and facilitate the creation of a government, the primary purpose of which, and on a very short-term basis, would be to see to it that the Prime Minister, who's been voted out 4 times, is eventually ushered out of Balfour Street, I think we would see we would really be seeing a new dawn in Israeli politics.
Ruthie, your response first. I will get you a chance to.
I don't know where to begin to tackle that one, but let me say there's no accident. The no accident here is that Prime Minister Netanyahu is the longest serving Prime Minister in the history of this country. And to say that he lost all 4 elections, let's put it this way, in the first round, he actually won that election, and based on Avigdor Lieberman having vowed that he would support him, and at the last minute said, no, okay, let's remember that. Second of all, to say that he totally lost, let's not forget that the Likud is the biggest party in the country, and he has the most votes, not the fewest votes. That's the second thing. And the final thing I want to say, and that has to do with Naftali Bennett and Jeremy. We are natural allies, and I would like to see nothing more than have Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked, his number 2, have ministerial positions in a government led by Netanyahu. I think it's a natural fit, and ideologically, not just Bibi, no Bibi.
All these scenarios are going to be discussed in depth after a very short break. Don't go anywhere. Our panelists will be back. We'll